I'd been running the clinic in Twisted Creek for 2 years when Jackson Cole first walked through my door, though walked isn't quite right for what he did that morning in late October. He limped, favored his right side like a man carrying a secret he didn't want anyone to know, moved with the deliberate care of someone who'd rather bleed out in private than admit he needed help. I was used to that look. The one that flickered across men's faces when they realized their doctor was a woman. That split second of doubt before they decided whether to stay or leave. Whether pain was stronger than pride. My father had been the doctor here. Trained me himself because I showed aptitude and he had no sons. When he died 3 years ago, I inherited his practice and his skeptics. The women brought me their children and their birthings without hesitation. The men brought me nothing until their pride lost the fight with their pain. And even then, they came reluctantly. I'd learned to live with it. Learned to make myself small in success, large in confidence. Show no doubt. Show no fear. Show them nothing they could use against you. Papa used to say, they'll test you. Sarah, every man will test you. Stay steady. I'd stayed steady for 2 years. Most nights, I locked the clinic door alone, one lamp on the table, one chair. Medical journals spread across the surface like proof I belonged here. I studied obsessively new surgical techniques, anatomical discoveries, treatments I'd never have the equipment to perform. Needed to be twice as good to be seen as half as competent. That's what Papa had taught me, and he'd been right about most things. The clinic smelled of carbolic acid and coffee. I kept a pot going on the stove all day. Strong, no sugar. I'd forgotten sugar existed somewhere along the way. Forgotten sweetness was possible. Jackson Cole stood in my doorway that October morning, one hand pressed against his ribs, the other gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing holding him upright. His ranch hand hovered behind him, young and scared. "Ma'am," the boy said, "he won't go to the doctor in Cheyenne. Says it's too far." I dried my hands on my apron. "I am the doctor." The boy's face went red. I didn't. "I know what you meant." I turned to Jackson. "Sit down, Mr. Cole." He didn't move, just studied me with eyes the color of winter sky. I studied him back. Rancher's hands, weathered face, probably mid-30s. Built the way men get built when they work land that doesn't forgive mistakes. Something in his eyes that looked like loss. "I don't need," he started. "Sit down, Mr. Cole." Not unkindly, but not asking, he sat. I examined him carefully, professionally, cataloging damage the way Papa had taught me. Broken ribs. Horse kicked him. The ranch hand explained, might be internal bleeding, needed to be monitored. Jackson didn't flinch when I palpated the injury. Didn't question my diagnosis. Just watched my hands work with something that looked almost like no... I stopped that thought before it finished. I'd made that mistake before. Men respected female doctors right up until they recovered, then went back to doubting everything we knew. 3 broken ribs. I said, "You're lucky. Could have punctured a lung. Don't feel lucky. You're breathing. That's lucky enough." I wrapped his ribs, gave him laudanum for the pain. Instructions for recovery. "Come back in a week. I need to check for complications." He paid full price. Didn't negotiate like most men did, trying to shortchange me because I was a woman. Just counted out the exact amount and said, "Thank you, doctor," like he meant it. I watched him leave, leaning on his ranch hand, moving carefully. I told myself I wouldn't think about him again. I lied. He came back for the follow-up appointment. Then another. Then another. 3 weeks of visits for an injury that should have needed 2. I didn't question it. Didn't let myself wonder why. But I noticed. Funny how I noticed everything about Jackson Cole, despite trying not to. The way his jaw set when he was in pain but wouldn't admit it. How he always came in the afternoon when the clinic was quietest. The careful way he said Dr. Hayes, like he was reminding himself I'd earned the title. He started asking questions. Not the doubting kind. I was used to genuinely curious. How had I learned to set bones so precisely? Where had I studied? What did I think about the new theories on infection prevention? No man had ever asked me those questions before. Not since Papa died. It unsettled me more than skepticism ever had. The fourth week. He brought his ranch hand in. Tom, the young one. Persistent cough that wouldn't quit. I listened to his lungs. Didn't like what I heard. Pneumonia, I said. Early stages. But it'll get worse. Jackson nodded. Didn't question. What does he need? Monitoring, medicine every 4 hours? Rest? I looked at Tom, who was already shaking his head. Real rest. Not working through it rest. He'll rest, Jackson said with the quiet authority of a man used to being obeyed. I'll make sure of it. Tom opened his mouth to argue. You'll rest? Jackson repeated. Not loud. Didn't need to be. I wrote out instructions, measured medicine. If he gets worse, send for me immediately. Pneumonia can turn fast. How fast? Hours? Sometimes. I met Jackson's eyes, saw real concern there. Don't wait if he struggles to breathe. He sent for me 3 days later. Midnight. Tom was worse, fever spiking. Breathing labored. I rode the 15 miles to the coal ranch through winter darkness, my medical bag heavy against my side. The ranch was bigger than I'd expected. Main house, bunkhouse, barn, corrals spreading out under starlight. Jackson met me at the door, lamplight catching the worry on his face. He's in the bunkhouse. This way. I treated Tom through the night and into the next day. Fever broke near dawn. He'd live, but he needed constant monitoring for another week at least. Too sick to move to town. That's when Jackson said it. You'll stay in the guest room. I should have argued. Should have insisted I could ride back and forth daily. But winter was coming hard and fast. The ride was dangerous in daylight, deadly in dark. I'll stay, I heard myself say. But only until he's stable. Jackson nodded. However long it takes. He showed me to the guest room. Clean, simple, a quilt on the bed handmade. Beautiful. His late wife's work. Probably. I wondered if he'd thought about that before offering me the room. I wondered why I was wondering. That first evening, I ate dinner at a table with 12 men who actually listened when I explained pneumonia care. Jackson sat at the head of the table, quiet, ensuring everyone understood what Tom needed. He didn't hover, didn't question my authority, just made space for me to work. I'd never felt so seen and so frightened at the same time. After dinner, Jackson walked me back to the guest room. Didn't speak. Just his boots on the wooden porch, steady and sure. At the door, he paused. Thank you for coming, he said. For staying. It's my job. Still, thank you. I lay awake that night in a stranger's bed, listening to the ranch settle around me. Horses in the barn. Wind in the eaves, footsteps I recognized as Jackson's moving through the house below. I thought about the way he'd said Dr. Hayes, like it was my real name, like it meant something. The week stretched to 10 days. Tom recovered, but other cases emerged. The cook burned her arm badly, second-degree burns that needed daily care. A cowboy broke his wrist. Small things that kept me there. Kept me useful, kept me from having to decide whether to leave. I didn't question why Jackson always found reasons for me to stay another day. Didn't admit why I stopped arguing. The guest room started to feel less like a guest room. I unpacked my traveling case, hung my spare dress, set my brush on the dresser. Small surrenders, I told myself, meant nothing. Every morning, coffee waited in the workspace Jackson had cleared for me in the ranch office. Strong, no sugar, he'd remembered. The first time I found it there. I stood holding the cup, wondering when I'd told him how I took my coffee. Wondering when he'd paid enough attention to notice. My horse was always groomed and fed without my asking. My medical supplies restocked when they ran low. The lamp in my workspace lit before I arrived each morning. Small kindnesses I tried not to let matter. Jackson asked my opinion on things beyond medicine. Ranch expansion plans, hiring decisions, the territorial political situation. We'd sit in his office after I finished evening rounds, him with his ledgers, me with my medical journals, talking about everything and nothing. "What do you think about bringing in Herefords?" he asked one night. "The market's shifting." I looked up from my anatomy text. "You're asking me about cattle. I'm asking your opinion. I don't know anything about cattle. You know about reading markets, making strategic decisions, managing risk." He leaned back in his chair. "What's the difference?" No man had ever asked me those questions. Not Papa, who'd loved me but never quite saw me as a colleague. Not the men in town who saw my gender before my competence. Just Jackson, treating me like my thoughts had value beyond medicine. I told him what I thought. He listened. Really listened. Days passed, then weeks. I stopped counting them. Started counting other things instead. How many times he smiled. How many times I almost smiled back. How many evenings we sat in comfortable silence. How many times I caught myself watching him work and had to look away. I noticed the second coffee cup before I realized I'd set it out. Old habits, I told myself. Lies. Myself answered, one evening, I found him standing by a grave on a small hill overlooking the ranch. The headstone read, Sarah Cole, beloved wife. My name, his wife. I started to turn away, give him privacy. Don't go, he said quietly. I stayed, silent, respectful. She died 3 years ago. He said, fever. Your father fought for 3 days to save her. Lost anyway. I'm sorry. Me too. He was quiet for a long moment. Sarah would have liked you. She always said this territory needed more women who wouldn't bend. I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know what it meant that he'd said it. Didn't know what to do with the ache in my chest that came from standing beside a man's grief and wanting to ease it. I'm sorry you lost her, I said. Finally. I'm sorry I'm not better at moving forward. I understood that. Being stuck. Being afraid to want anything new. I'd been stuck since Papa died, proving myself to ghosts. We walked back to the house in silence. His shoulder, almost touching mine. Close enough to feel his warmth. Far enough to maintain the careful distance we'd been keeping. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about the way he'd shared his grief with me. Kept wondering what it meant. Kept knowing I was in trouble. Time moved differently at the ranch. Slower. Fuller. I fell into rhythms I didn't know I'd been missing morning coffee. Afternoon rounds. Evening conversations. The pattern of a life that felt less lonely than the one I'd been living. I told myself it was temporary. Told myself I'd go back to town once everyone was healed. Told myself lies that got easier with practice. Jackson and I worked in comfortable silence most days. He'd handle ranch business while I updated medical records. Sometimes he'd ask questions about anatomy, genuinely curious about how bodies worked. I'd ask about ranch management, learning about a world I'd never considered. Why did you become a doctor? He asked one afternoon. Papa needed help. I was good at it. Hi, that's not a reason. That's a circumstance. I set down my pen, looked at him. I wanted to matter. Wanted to do something that couldn't be dismissed, just because I'm a woman. Does it work? I laughed, sharp and bitter. No, I'm twice as good and half as trusted. I trust you. 3 words. He said them simply, like stating a fact. Like it was that easy. I didn't know what to do with that kind of trust. Didn't know how to hold it without breaking it. The ranch hands started coming to me with small things, headaches, minor injuries, questions about ailments they'd been living with for years. Jackson never told them to. They just did. Started calling me Doc like it was natural. I wondered when I'd stopped being an outsider here. When had I become part of this place evenings? Jackson would appear when I finished rounds. Never asked if I wanted company. Just walked me from the bunkhouse to the main house. His presence steady beside me. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. The silence felt less empty than being alone. I could tell his mood by the rhythm of his footsteps. Fast meant problems with the ranch. Slow meant he was tired. Hesitant meant he was thinking about his wife. I cataloged these things the way I cataloged symptoms, storing information I'd need later. One night, I was treating a mare with an infected leg wound in the barn. Jackson came in, watched me work. "You're good at this," he said. "It's a horse. It's a living thing in pain. You're gentle with her." The mare shifted, uncomfortable but trusting. I stroked her neck, murmuring soft reassurances while I cleaned the wound. Jackson handed me supplies before I asked for them. Anticipated what I'd need next. We worked together smoothly, naturally, like we'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. "Thank you," I said when we finished. "For what? Understanding what I need before I ask for it." He smiled. "Same thing you do for me." Did I thought about morning coffee, about the way I'd started setting out 2 cups without thinking, about how I'd learned to read his silences. Maybe I did. Walking back to the house, he said, "I'm glad you stayed." I should have said something professional, something about patient care and medical responsibility. Instead, I said, "I'm glad I stayed too." It was the most honest thing I'd said in weeks. That night, lying in bed, the guest bed that had started to feel like mine, I admitted what I'd been avoiding. I wasn't staying because of patience anymore. I was staying because leaving felt impossible. Because somewhere between setting broken bones and drinking bitter coffee, I'd started to belong here. And that terrified me. The crisis came on a Tuesday. The foreman's wife went into labor, her 3rd child. Should have been routine. But nothing about that birth was routine. Breech presentation? Complications? The kind of delivery I'd seen kill women before. I worked for 16 hours straight. Everything I'd ever learned, every technique Papa had taught me, every journal article I'd memorized. The baby was stuck. The mother was bleeding. Time was running out. Jackson appeared in the doorway at hour 12. Didn't speak. Just brought water, fresh towels, whatever I needed. His presence steady in my peripheral vision. "You should rest," he said quietly during a brief pause. "Can't. If I leave, I'll watch. You taught me what to look for. Sleep 1 hour. I'll wake you if anything changes." I should have refused. Should have insisted only I could monitor this situation. But I'd been awake for 18 hours before the labor even started. My hands were shaking. My vision blurred. 1 hour. I agreed. He nodded, pulled up a chair beside the laboring woman, took her pulse, checked her color, did exactly what I would have done. I slept on a cot in the next room. Woke 50 minutes later to Jackson's hand on my shoulder. "No change," he said, "but I think you should check." I checked, made a decision. Maneuvered the baby with techniques most doctors didn't know. delivered a healthy girl, and saved the mother's life. When it was over, when both mother and baby were stable and sleeping, I made it 3 steps out of the birthing room before my legs gave out. Jackson caught me. Didn't ask permission. Just lifted me to a chair and brought water and made me drink. "You need to rest," he said. "I need to monitor. I'll monitor every 15 minutes. Pulse, temperature, bleeding. You taught me. Trust me." I looked at him. At this man who'd learned medical observation because I needed help. Who'd stood beside me for 16 hours without complaint. Who was asking me to trust him the way he'd trusted me. "Okay," I whispered. I slept for 2 hours. Woke to find Jackson had kept detailed notes. Pulse rates, temperature, observations. He'd done exactly what I would have done. And he'd done it right. "You'd make a good nurse," I told him. I had a good teacher. That night, we sat in the kitchen drinking coffee neither of us needed. The house was quiet, everyone sleeping, just us and the lamplight and the weight of the day lifting slowly. "I'm afraid I'll fail them," I said. Didn't mean to. The words just came, pulled out by exhaustion and honesty. "Everyone who trusts me. One mistake, and I'll prove every skeptic right." Jackson was quiet for a long moment. "Then, you know what I see. Woman who just delivered a baby in a breech position that would have killed both. Mother and child if anyone else had been here. Woman who's treated half my crew for things that would have gotten worse without you. You're not afraid of failing. You're afraid of letting yourself believe you're that good." I stared at my coffee. He'd seen it. The wound I'd never shown anyone. The doubt beneath all my competence. "What if they're right?" I whispered. "What if I'm not good enough? What if you are—" He leaned forward. "What if you're exactly good enough? And the only person who doesn't see it is you?" I looked up, met his eyes, saw something there that made my breath catch. "I see you. Sarah," he said quietly. Used my first name for the first time. Not the doctor. Not the woman trying to prove herself. You. And what I see is someone extraordinary who's spent so long defending herself. She's forgotten she already won. I didn't know what to do with being seen that completely. Didn't know how to hold this moment without breaking it. "Thank you," I said. Inadequate. Insufficient. The only words I had. He reached across the table, covered my hand with his. "You don't have to thank me for telling the truth." His hand was warm, calloused, real. I didn't pull away. Thomas Brennan came for me on a Thursday afternoon, drunk, angry, grief-rotted from the inside. His wife had died 3 months ago. Childbed fever. I'd fought for 3 days to save her. Used everything I knew. And lost anyway. He'd blamed me ever since. Told everyone in town I'd killed her through incompetence. That a real doctor could have saved her. I'd learned to live with his hatred. Learned to see it for what it was, grief with nowhere else to go. But grief drunk on whiskey and rage was different. Dangerous. He found me in the barn, checking on the mare's healing leg wound. The mare I'd saved. Evidence. I knew what I was doing. Evidence that didn't matter to a man who'd lost everything. "You killed her," he said from the doorway. I turned slowly. Saw the gun. Not pointed at me yet. But there. Present. Possible. "Mr. Brennan," I said carefully, "I'm sorry for your loss. I did everything I could. Everything." His voice cracked. "Everything. You're just a woman playing doctor with people's lives. The real Doc Hayes. My father. The ghost I'd been competing with for 3 years. Your wife had placental abruption," I said steadily. "Internal bleeding? Even my father couldn't have saved her. I tried everything, Everything, he repeated bitterly. The gun rose, still not aimed, but rising. Then Jackson was there, appeared from the barn's far end like he'd been summoned. Didn't draw a weapon. Didn't threaten. Just positioned himself where Brennan would have to shoot through him to reach me. Tom, Jackson said quietly. Just his name. Nothing more. She killed my wife. No. Jackson said, fever killed your wife. Same fever that killed mine. Same fever that kills women every day despite good doctors fighting to save them. Brennan's hand shook. If she'd been better, she was there for 3 days. Jackson said, never left your wife's side. I know because I brought her food she didn't eat and coffee she didn't drink. She fought for your wife like she was family. Lost anyway. Some things even good doctors can't fix. I stepped around Jackson. Needed Brennan to see my face. Needed this conversation to happen directly. I'm sorry I couldn't save her, I said. I'm sorry you're alone now. I'm sorry this territory is so hard on women that we lose them to things that shouldn't kill them. But pointing that gun won't bring her back. Something in Brennan broke. The gun lowered. He sank to his knees in the barn dirt and wept. I treated his grief the way I'd treat a wound honestly, with compassion, without false promises. Sat beside him while he cried. Told him his wife had fought hard, that she'd wanted to live, that some battles couldn't be won no matter how hard we fought. Jackson walked him home after. I stayed in the barn with the mare, my hands shaking now that the danger had passed. When Jackson came back, he found me there. Didn't speak, just sat beside me in the hay. You should have let me handle it, I said. I wasn't handling it, just witnessing it. You could have been shot. So could you. He looked at me. Did you really think I'd stand back and let that happen? It was my fight. It was grief. And you handled it exactly right. We sat in silence, his shoulder warm against mine, the barn settling around us. I'm not afraid of the gun, I admitted quietly. I'm afraid he was right, that I'm not good enough. That one day, everyone will see what I see in the mirror, a woman pretending she knows more than she does. What do you see when you look at me? Jackson asked. I looked, really looked. Saw a man who'd lost his wife and kept going. A man who'd learned medical observation because I needed help. A man who'd stood between me and a gun without hesitation. I see someone strong, I said. Someone competent. Someone doing his best. That's what I see when I look at you. He said simply, maybe it's time you started seeing it too. I couldn't sleep after Brennan. Couldn't stop my mind from racing through every possible failure. Every patient I might lose. Every mistake I might make. Every time I wouldn't be good enough and someone would die because of it. At midnight, I started packing. Medical bag first, then my traveling case. 1 dress, 2, the brush from the dresser. Piece by piece, I dismantled the life I'd been building here. Told myself it was better this way. Better to leave before I failed someone who mattered. Before Jackson saw me clearly and realized Brennan was right. Better to protect my heart by leaving before it could be broken. I'd leave at dawn, ride back to town, return to my lonely clinic and my locked door, and my life of proving myself to people who'd never believe. The knock on my door came at 2 a.m. You're leaving, Jackson said when I opened it. Not a question. It's better this way. Better for who I couldn't look at him. Couldn't bear to see disappointment in his eyes when I admitted my cowardice. Everyone I care about, I lose. My mother died when I was 12. Papa 3 years ago. Every patient I can't save. And everyone who trusts me, eventually I'll fail them. I can't. My voice broke. I can't do that to you. You think you're the only one afraid?" I looked up then, saw something raw in his face. Sarah died, and I swore I'd never let myself care about anyone again. He said quietly, "Safer alone. Safer not to want anything. But then you came here with your stubborn competence and your coffee without sugar, and your absolute refusal to see how extraordinary you are. And I started wanting things I thought I'd buried with her. Jackson, I'm not asking you to stay forever," he said. "I'm asking you not to run tonight. Give tomorrow a chance. Give us a chance. What if I fail you? What if you don't?" He stepped closer. "What if we're both terrified and both brave enough to try anyway?" I thought about my mother dying, my father dying, every patient I'd lost, despite doing everything right. Every time being good enough hadn't been enough. But I thought about the breech delivery too. About 16 hours of fighting for a life and winning. About Jackson's detailed notes and steady presence. About the ranch hands who called me Doc like they meant it. About the fact that I'd been running from my own fear for so long. I'd forgotten how to stand still. "One more day," I said finally. "That's all I'm asking." He left me alone then. Trusted me to make my own choice. Didn't pressure or plead or try to fix my fear. I looked at my packed bags, at the life I'd been ready to abandon, at the second coffee cup sitting on the dresser. Evidence I'd already chosen, whether I'd admitted it or not. I unpacked slowly, one item at a time. Not because Jackson asked, because I was tired of running from the possibility of being happy. I sat on the bed until dawn, watching tomorrow arrive through the window, wondering what it would bring, hoping I'd be brave enough to find out. 3 weeks later, Jackson crashed through my clinic door at midnight. I'd gone back to town 2 days before a patient needed me there. I'd left the ranch reluctantly, promising to return. The clinic felt emptier than it had before. One lamp, one chair, coffee that tasted wrong without Jackson's presence across the table. Now, he was here, carried by 2 of his ranch hands. Gunshot wound to the chest. The sound of boots on my clean floor. The smell of blood and gunpowder and fear. His face gray with pain, but conscious, aware, looking at me like I was his only hope. "Ambush," one of the hands said, voice shaking. "We tried to get the bullet out, but you made it worse," I finished. Examining the wound, they'd tried field surgery, panicked, pushed the bullet deeper. It was lodged near his heart now. I could see the outline of it under his skin. One wrong move, and he'd die instantly. 5 minutes, I said. Maybe less before he bleeds out. My hands shook, trembled so badly I could barely hold my instruments. This was it. The nightmare I'd always feared. The impossible situation. The moment every doubt I'd ever had would be proven right. I had no anesthesia stronger than whiskey. No surgical team. No way to know if I was good enough for this. "I can't do this," I whispered. "I've never done this. The bullet's too close to his heart. One slip and, Sarah," Jackson's voice, rough with pain. His eyes found mine, clear, despite everything. "Certain, I trust you." 3 words. Those 3 words steadied something in me I didn't know could be steadied. I stopped seeing the impossibility, started seeing the anatomy, the training. Every surgery I'd observed with Papa, every journal article I'd memorized, every hour I'd spent proving I belonged in this profession. He trusted me. Now I needed to trust myself. I gave him all the whiskey I had. Tied him down, he'd move involuntarily, and I couldn't have that. Positioned the lamp directly over his chest. My hands still shook. But they knew what to do. They'd always known. I cut clean, precise. Found the bullet exactly where I'd predicted. Lodged against the pericardium? One slip would tear the sac around his heart. He'd bleed out in seconds. I thought about every patient I'd saved. Every time I'd been good enough. Every moment I'd doubted myself and been wrong about that doubt. I thought about Jackson teaching himself medical observation because I needed help. About him standing between me and Brennan's gun. About the way he'd said, "I trust you," like it was the simplest truth in the world. I extracted the bullet. Slowly, carefully, my hand steady now. It came free. I controlled the bleeding. Sutured in layers skin, muscle, fascia. Work I'd only read about in books. Work I'd never been certain I could do. 2 hours later, his pulse was strong. The bleeding had stopped. He was stable. He'd live. I sat beside him until dawn, watching him breathe. Watching the evidence that I'd done the impossible, that I'd trusted my hands and my training and myself. And it had been enough. More than enough. When he woke, groggy, in pain, but alive, his first words were, "Told you I trusted you." I laughed, sharp and wet and full of relief. I know. Do you trust yourself now? I looked at my hands. Steady, competent. The hands that had saved his life. The hands I'd been doubting for 3 years. "Yes," I said. "I think I do." He smiled, reached for my hand, held it like it was precious. "Good. Because I need you to keep saving my life." "You planning on getting shot again?" "No. But I'm planning on loving you. And that's just as dangerous." I should have been surprised. Should have needed time to think. Should have run like I always ran from anything that could hurt me. Instead, I said, "I'm planning on loving you too, so I guess we're both in danger." He laughed, winced. "Don't make me laugh. Hurts? Then stop being charming." "Can't. It's how I got you to stay." He was right, but it wasn't just his charm. It was his trust, his steady presence, the way he'd seen me when I couldn't see myself. The way he'd taught me that being enough wasn't about being perfect. It was about being brave enough to try. Jackson recovered slowly, stubbornly, complaining about my careful monitoring and following every instruction I gave him anyway. When he was strong enough, 6 weeks after the surgery, he asked me to marry him. I almost said no. Almost ran back to my old fear. Almost chose safety over possibility. Then I remembered my hand steady on that scalpel. Remembered extracting a bullet I'd been certain I couldn't extract. Remembered being brave enough to trust myself. "Yes," I said, "but I'm keeping the clinic." His smile lit up the room. "I wouldn't have you any other way." We built something I never knew was possible. I ran the clinic in Twisted Creek. He ran the ranch. We made space for both, made a life that honored what we each needed to be whole. The community that once doubted me started trusting me not because I'd saved Jackson Cole, but because I'd finally stopped apologizing for my competence. Stopped making myself small. Started believing I belonged exactly where I was. Women brought me their children and their difficult births. Men brought me their injuries and their illnesses. Eventually. They all just brought me their trust. Looking back now, 20 years later, I understand what I couldn't see then. It wasn't about being good enough. It was about believing I was... Jackson didn't rescue me that night. I almost left. He witnessed my fear and stood beside it without trying to fix it. Trusted me to make my own choice. And I didn't save his life because he believed in me. I saved his life because I finally believed in myself. That's the difference. That's everything. We sit on the porch now. 2 decades of marriage behind us. My medical journal stacked beside his ranch ledgers. 2 coffee cups instead of 1 still strong. Still no sugar. But somehow sweeter than they used to be. The territory's changed. Women doctors aren't as rare as they once were. The battles I fought are easier for the women coming after me. I like to think I helped with that. Helped prove we belonged here all along. They still call me Doc in town, but Jackson calls me by my name. Sarah. The name my father gave me. The name I learned to trust again. Sometimes, when he thinks I'm not watching, I catch him looking at me the way he did that midnight, with absolute trust. I've learned to look at myself the same way. That's the real healing, not the surgeries, or the lives saved. It's trusting your own hands when they shake. It's believing you're enough, even when fear says you're not. It's choosing to stay when every instinct screams to run. I chose to stay. And in staying, I found everything I thought I'd lost when I learned to be alone. Not because Jackson completed me, I was always complete, but because he witnessed me completing myself. Saw me clearly and loved what he saw. Trusted me until I could trust myself. That's what love does. I've learned real love. It doesn't rescue or fix or complete. It witnesses. It trusts. It stands steady while you find your own courage. I'd spent so long protecting my heart. I'd forgotten hearts were meant to be used. Meant to risk breaking. Meant to trust and be trusted. The bullet I extracted from Jackson's chest sits in a small box on my desk. Reminder of the night I stopped doubting my hands. The night I chose to believe I was exactly good enough. Some women need to be saved. I needed to save myself. And I did. With steady hands and stubborn courage and the kind of love that trusted me to be brave. I pass that legacy to the women who come to me now, young and uncertain and full of doubt. I tell them, your hands know what to do. Trust them. Trust yourself. The skeptics will always doubt. Let them. You don't need their permission to be extraordinary. You just need your own.